Yeah, good evening and welcome to Evening Report tonight. We're joined by Paul Buchanan, who is going to talk to us about his analysis and his take on the Nicky Hager-led investigation into New Zealand's spying operations via the GCSB, which was published in the New Zealand Herald today. In short, it revealed how New Zealand spies on Japan, Vietnam, China, India, Pakistan, South American nations, which is a surprise, and a range of other countries, as the New Zealand Herald wrote today. So reading from that, we'll just go to Paul Buchanan. Paul, what do you make of these latest revelations?
Well, let me first say good evening and congratulations on this venture, Selwyn. It's a very welcome and needed addition to the media landscape in New Zealand. Now, as far as the revelations are concerned, not entirely surprising, but the depth, in terms of the scope, it's not that surprising, although we can get into that a little bit. The depth is interesting because I guess what people need to understand is in the intelligence business, you play offense and defense. And so counterintelligence, where you're spying on spies and whatnot, that's the defensive side. And obviously, in the signals intelligence community, when you're trying to fend off cyber hacking, that's the defensive side. And for us in New Zealand, that was the major justification for the amendments to the GCSB Act last year that expanded the powers of the GCSB. However, you also play offense. And what was very revealing in this particular tranche was that the GCSB installs malware on the communications of foreign diplomats. And that means we're being very offensive, no pun intended, when it comes to the private communications, not only of what you could consider hostile states like North Korea, but to our allies, partners, and friends.
Okay, well, let's just have a really good look at this. For example, if we go to the New Zealand Herald, the main article here, sourced by obviously the Snowden documents, the Snowden revelations. Nicky Hager is in direct contact with Edward Snowden and obviously with The Intercept. New Zealand Herald, amazing collaboration amongst mainstream media on this one. They've got to be applauded here. To recap on the detail, what we've got is the GCSB, this is written in the Herald this morning, the GCSB provides collection on China, Japan, North Korea, Vietnamese, South American diplomat communications, South Pacific nations, Pakistan, India, Iran, and Antarctica. Now, you know, this whole thing here, Paul, it clearly is an issue of national interest for New Zealand too. And the New Zealand Herald raised that point to a degree and said, you know, that the documents, for example, were obtained by the NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden, but highlight discrepancies between secret and official foreign policy adopted by New Zealand. So how do you read that element of the revelations relating to New Zealand's foreign policy? We often used to bask in its independence. What does it mean for New Zealand now, Paul?
Well, it gives the lie to the notion of independence and autonomy in international relations and foreign affairs, and therein lies the rub, because I mean, there's the old saw that when politicians lie when they open their mouths. When diplomats say yes, they mean maybe. When they say maybe, they mean no. So there obviously is a lot of fudging and gray area when it comes to foreign policy pronouncements, but it is very difficult for a country like New Zealand, which has a public platform of being independent and autonomous in international affairs, an honest broker, as they often like to say, a country that campaigned for the UN Security Council temporary seat as a representative of small island nations, as a representative of countries that were nine to line, to then be found out to not only be spying on ostensible allies and trading partners, but doing so largely at the behest of the United States, the UK, and perhaps Canada and Australia. And I think there will be diplomatic fallout as a result of these revelations, and there are more to come. this isn't the end of it when it comes to the Snowden files on New Zealand. So I fear that there's trouble ahead for New Zealand.
You know, in the past, you've made mention of New Zealand straddling right across from the Eastern Pacific, right across to Southeast Asia, that it's got one leg in the United States' security apparatus, its defence declarations, etc., with New Zealand, the friendlier nation status, becoming an ally, but on trade, its dependency on Southeast Asia, particularly China, but certainly the ASEAN nations. Now, you've said in the past that New Zealand risked tripping itself up. Now, is this the issue that is the tripwire, in your opinion?
Well, this could be the beginning of the end, and you're absolutely right. I have, for quite a while. In fact, I can pinpoint it since the signing of the Wellington and Washington declarations that align New Zealand not only very closely to the United States as a military partner, but made it a first-tier military and security partner of the United States. That, given the trade orientation towards Southeast Asia, the PRC in particular, and increasingly Central Asia and the Middle East, that juxtaposition, trading preferentially with the East and China in particular, yet aligning New Zealand even more closely to the United States, was untenable over the long term. If we think of it as straddling the fence, that's a barbed wire fence. And this could be the beginning of losing a toehold over that fence, in the sense that the Chinese probably knew that as a part of Five Eyes, New Zealand was tapping into their communications. But the thing with diplomacy is that people may well know things. It's like the relative you don't want to talk about. You may well know these things, but when they come into the open, you have to respond publicly to them. You know, you can't even to just save face. You can't just let bygones be bygones. And we, as the smallest and most trade-dependent partner of the Five Eyes, are clearly the most vulnerable. So whereas the PRC may not want to retaliate against the Australians because they depend on them for strategic minerals, they may not wish to retaliate against the United States because the United States is a formidable adversary. We're easy to pick on, and one has to wonder why the successive New Zealand governments, but particularly this one, have so slavishly followed the lead of the larger partners, and the United States in particular, when it comes to targeting foreign communications. You know, I would have hoped, but apparently that's too much hope, that New Zealand would pick and choose the targets that it would then not only use for its own national interest, but that it would pass along to the NSA, and apparently that's not the case.
And do you think that this type of unease or displeasure, particularly within the People's Republic of China, is going to spill out into the public arena, or is it going to be that New Zealand is spoken of like you say, you know, the horrible in-law, or the embarrassing relative, or the embarrassing friend, where you whisper in the shadows but you don't actually say it in public? Are we going to see this in public?
Well, the way things are going, yes, we will. But you know, let me back up a little bit. When Edward Snowden left Hawaii, he obviously took, you know, hundreds of thousands of files with him. The Americans are saying it's the worst security branch intelligence breach ever in the history of the United States. But that was known to the Americans about a month after he left. They did a forensic audit. They figured out what he took. And, of course, they would then share what they know that Snowden took. So the New Zealand government has known since mid-2013 what Snowden has on New Zealand. And I would have thought the prudent thing to do, knowing that this would eventually come out, is that the New Zealand government would approach those governments, particularly strategically important governments like that of the PRC, and explain to them the circumstances under which this espionage occurred, offer the due apologies, and hopefully keep it all private and as a private conversation between diplomats. But the Prime Minister of New Zealand has repeatedly said that he is not concerned about the revelations. It's old news. Who cares? It's nothing but conspiracy theorists and what have you. And that indicates to me that either he's completely out of the loop, or there is no contingency planning. They've done nothing in order to forestall a public backlash against them by these targets of espionage. And if that's the case, again, we're in serious trouble. Now, if he's obfuscating and blustering while the diplomats quietly talked to not only the Chinese, mind you, I mean, these South American countries will not be happy to know that they're being spied on. Trading partners like Iran, as much as the United States has a beef with Iran, the last I've read, New Zealand has good diplomatic relations with the Republic of Iran. So, I believe that if they have not been proactive and gotten out in front of this as soon as they found out what Snowden had on New Zealand, then yes, this is going to become public, and once it becomes public, it becomes uncontrollable on the part of the New Zealand government. The cat is out of the bag at that point, and then it's all about damage control. And I should hasten to add that as the smaller partner, the ability to limit the damage is limited itself.